Welcome back to another episode of the Ryan Holtz Show Podcast. Times two. Hey, listen, Diddy. We have hot topics here for you. We got some major tea. Now, listen, I wanted to bring on an expert that not only could break down the legal portion of the Diddy trial, but also break it down in such a way that you can understand it. She is known as your legal bestie, Simone Redwine, founder, principal at Redwine Law Firm. Welcome to Team Holtz Nation. And, thank you for blessing us with your presence, my friend.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so Diddy, I'd seen you on Don Lemon's show. You were literally standing outside of the courtroom giving commentary. And I thought, my God, the way she's breaking this down is perfect. Now, you literally kind of predicted the exact sentence he would get. You said 3 to 5 years. He got 50 months. Now, he's also got time served. So what we want to know here at Team Holtz Land is that, what does this mean? What does this all mean in legal jargon? How much time is he actually going to serve? Is it just? What's your opinion on this?
So as far as additional time, it looks like it could be about another year. Let me show you the math. So about another year. If you've got like a little calculator there, we can kind of do some mental math together. So he was sentenced to 50 months, 50. And then when you're doing federal time, you get about 15% of that off. So, you have to do about 85% of your time. So I think 85% would be, I think that's 37. Is that right? What's 85%
Yes.
of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say 37 months. Okay, then from those 37 months, he is joining he asked to join a drug program and getting into that, and there's no reason that he shouldn't get into that one. It would take, because of his sentence, about another 12 months off. So you got 37 months minus 12 months. So that gets us to what? 20, what is that?
37 minus 12.
Yeah,
Wait a second.
where
Let
we
me use my friendly calculator.
Okay.
You're left over at 25.
We got 25 months. Okay. And then he gets credit for 13 months. So take away 13 months from that.
Yeah, minus 13. We got 12.
So he's got about another year, it looks like, another year to 2 years if he gets to do that drug program. And while some people are like, that's not enough time, I think we have to look at the broader message. My hope is that any woman who's ever experienced domestic violence, if you've had a mother or a loved one experience domestic violence, that maybe you can wake up and feel a little more safe in America today, knowing that there was a federal judge that sentenced probably one of the biggest moguls in the music history today to 4 years, largely based on his admission that he committed domestic violence.
Now, what I've been hearing is that because of that video with Cassie in the elevator that everybody's seen, that was, grotesque, is that played a big factor, unofficially. But what I also heard was prior to sentencing, the judge had basically found out, and I think the prosecution laid this out, that, he's already making plans to do speaking engagements, all these things. I don't know if it's true. I mean, you're there. You probably know
Yes,
more
it's
about
true.
that than
It was
me.
true.
So I have to think, because again, I'm just thinking if I'm the audience or I'm wondering what's going on here. If I'm that sitting judge and I'm finding out that this person is literally, basically say, well, I'm out, I'm already making my dinner plans. Like, does that factor into sentencing?
So I would say, of course it does, right? And the smirk on my face is not making light in any way of domestic violence. The smirk is, this is why I love what I do. This is why I sat in the courtroom daily, because stuff wasn't making sense. So like the first week when they were picking the jury and going through that, I was at home. I wasn't there. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take my talents there. That way I can be able to speak from a place of knowledge. And yes, in his, Diddy wrote directly to the judge in a 4-page letter. And one of the things he said in that letter is, if you let him out, he's going to immediately start helping people. He has a speaking engagement set up for Monday. Well, then in court, what happened was one of his attorneys, Xavier Donaldson, that's the African-American man, he said, Your Honor, I need to clarify this, because one of the first things, so what happened at the day of sentencing is the prosecution, the government got to start. And the government made a slick comment that said, Your Honor, we are asking you to give him 135 months because he's not taking this seriously. And that he's got a speaking engagement set for Monday. So what his attorney said is, Your Honor, that's not correct. I need to clarify. And what he stated was that it wasn't a speaking engagement. It was a teaching engagement, quote unquote. What he said is that they wanted to present to the judge a plan that would basically be a plan of what would Diddy do to fill his days if granted time served. And so the attorney laid on his sword and explained that the attorney himself, after learning that Diddy had created this program in jail to basically teach the people on the cell block how he became Diddy, he called it Free Game with Diddy. And that was a once a week thing that he had done for about 6 weeks. And that the attorney Donaldson had made some calls to find out where could he expand this to so that he could continue teaching and helping people from outside of the bars. And so what he was saying is he set up the speaking engagement. I believe it was going to be with children on Monday. And it was actually a big back and forth between the judge, the prosecution, and Xavier, where he wanted to very much make clear to the judge, this is not in any way disrespect or a way of showing he thinks he's above the law and won't be there on Monday, but it's showing a plan. And so the judge, and he kept going on, and they wanted to call up another witness that was part of like some transition out of prison program to speak to the significance of what those speaking engagements would be like. And the judge was like, look. If the purpose of you calling these other people, because it was getting late, we were like, what is your sentence? We got to go home. I had a flight to Mexico. I got some place to be, right? It was like 3:00. Then the judge was like, look, if the purpose is for me to know that this wasn't, just arrogance, but that this was a legitimate speaking engagement that was going to speak towards, reform or what have you, I believe you. So that's not an issue. I believe the judge, those were the judge's words. So I say to say it wasn't that. What it was is the defense left the judge no choice but to sentence that man to 4 years. And I can explain if you'd like.
I would love that. No, please explain.
So here's what it is. You cannot sit up there in that courtroom every day, the way that the defense said, and say, Your Honor, this isn't RICO, this isn't trafficking, it's just domestic violence, without then, during the sentencing phase, being sentenced for adding domestic violence to the offense. So the judge was like, and in fact, when the defense, after the sentencing, and he beat the RICO charge and he beat the trafficking charge, when he was seeking to go home to await sentencing, the judge said, I can't even send you home because the law says where the offense was committed with violence, you have to sit here until your sentencing day. And Mark Agnifilo, his lead, Mark, you stood up here and said it was violence. Brian Steele, you stood up here and said it was violence. All y'all stood up, said, look me in my eyeballs, and said it was domestic violence. So in turn, I have to follow the law. So that's how that ended up playing out. And I think a lot of people were concerned because Diddy is planning to appeal. Understandable. If you've got that money, go for it. The truth is, honey, by the time he gets done with that appeal, he'd probably already be home. He'd be home. But also, part of the reason he wants to appeal is their claim is that the judge sentenced him for offenses that he was acquitted for. But the judge took special time to say no. So he was acquitted for the trafficking. He was acquitted of the RICO.
The most serious charges, though,
the most serious
those
charges.
are the most serious ones.
And here's the thing. Regarding his lawyers, they did a smash-up job. I would have done the same thing. Because at the end of the day, if you get up there and say, well, it's domestic violence, and in turn, my client don't have to face a life sentence and doesn't have to forfeit every single one of his assets and homes and stuff. He's only got to pay like $500,000, and he's got to forfeit some specific property that both sides agreed on, the government. That's different. But if that in turn led to this, that's a win. But what happens here is under the law, what the judge was explaining, and I double checked to pull, of course, federal judges, you guys have to understand, these are lifetime appointments. That man don't care nothing about what you and I think, the judge, right? He's not a judge where people can write petitions and anything will happen. He's there for life. And that judge explained that, number one, and I told this on my channel, I said, when people say, well, what do you think he's going to get? I said, it's really going to come down to the probation sentencing report, because that is the recommendation taking all factors into life. It takes into account the fact that he was on substances and that he may have behaved differently if he wasn't. It takes into effect the violence and those things. And it does not take into effect the acquitted offenses. But what it did was it actually gave a range of they wanted 60 months, 60 is what probation wanted. And the judge actually took 10 months, gave Diddy additional credit. He took 10 months off because of the fact that he was a first timer, as well as he considered like the substances, and perhaps, I don't know, he may have considered the family, his family structure. He didn't say that. He said, though, he did give consideration for the substances, the fact that he was on substances, as well as first-time offender. So in turn, that's the range. When the judge is trying to decide amongst the range within the federal guidelines, when there's violence, he has to go higher on the range, and that's what he did. So this was not an unfair thing. You cannot, where there's violence, you cannot do time served under these facts. You just can't. It was two people, and let me tell you, where is my gavel? Hold on, I got my gavel.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Hear ye.
There we go.
Let me tell you, this was the quote that had me flabbergasted. Okay, my gabbers were flaccid. So the judge is this little teensy little, he's like little skinny. He's size extra small, okay? He's a petite little thing. South Indian judge, brown skin, about my complexion or so. He's got a little side part, little silky hair. He just looks meek and meager, okay? But brilliant. And this is what he said he had to hang his hat on. Why, under no circumstances, could he, under the law, simply give time served? He said, and of all the things, you talked about the violence, and specifically, the reason the violence was relevant is the judge specifically considered the violence that took place during the freak-offs. Because the freak-offs were the transportation across state lines. And the video that we saw there, the Cassie video of the beatdown, that was violence at and during a freak-off. There was a butt-naked man sitting on the bed in there when old girl left. There was a butt-naked man. I would like to know which one it was. Which one? They talk about it. He was a good-looking butt-naked man, okay, when all of that transpired. That's relevant. But what the judge said is, in addition to that, so it's not just a freak-off. You have to consider it's a freak-off where he's whooping that tail when she is not behaving at the freak-off as he wishes. That matters. And then the judge said, even after what you did to Cassie with Jane, you had a month before, you had just apologized on national TV for what you did to Cassie. And then you get in a fight with Jane. Now, I say it was mutual combat. Jane started that fight. There's no doubt about that. But then he accelerated it. He aggravated it and made it way worse, right? But then after the fight was over, you took drugs, you stuffed it in her mouth, and you said, this is the judge, quote unquote, bitch, take this pill and get out there and suck some D.
Wow.
The judge said that.
Wow.
And it was at that moment I said, oh, he's going to jail. He's going to jail. He's got to go in the jail. Those were Diddy's words from the court transcript. And so the point was, you knew you were under federal investigation, and this is how you behaved at a freak-off. So you whooped the girl's tail, and then after getting whooped on, she didn't want to do a freak-off, and you gave her the pill, told her she got to take it, and get out there and S some D for YouTube purposes.
Wow.
When he said that, I said, well, Judge, I guess you did what you needed to do.
Now, you were in the courtroom, so you're literally seeing this.
Yes, and I clutched my pearls.
What was Diddy's facial expression when the judge was saying this?
At one point, there was this sigh. It wasn't a sigh. It was like a shit. So because the judge said all these mitigating things first, and then he goes, however. When that judge said, however, the entire courtroom went, oh, yeah, that's what they did. That's what they did. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
the whole courtroom went, oh. And I said,
and not to make light of this,
I
but
said, they finna get him.
I think about being a child and being, in trouble with your parents, and they give you that first little bit of the speech, and then you see that, however. That's the part,
that however
too, for me.
Means the belt's coming out. You're about to tap that bottom. My mom's going to get your bottom.
So in the courtroom, you're there. The vibe of the courtroom, it's quiet. You're saying the judge is small. You got Diddy there. I mean, what is Diddy looking like? He's gray,
And the
got a beard.
children are like the children. So when this is happening, I think I heard like a yelp, like there was an audible noise from the family side. Diddy is looking down, and he at one point he has a napkin and he wipes his eyes. Because prior to this, Diddy was the last person that spoke. And he apologized to his mom, and in tears he said, "I'm sorry." Hold on, I got my notebook. I want to say it, quote unquote. I want to say it right. He said, these notes are crazy. He said the other factors, the government mitigating, the family ties, the community ties. Diddy looked up and he said, "Mama, I'm sorry. I failed you. I failed, Mama. I'm so sorry." And it said, yes, Diddy, he had a deep sigh and he said to his mom, he said, Mom, I knew better. I knew better. He said, I have been humbled and broken to my core. He said, I hate myself. He cried when he apologized to his kids, and he says, Mommy, not mom, Mommy, I failed you as a son, and I'm sorry. And his tears, he couldn't hold them back. I do believe I believed him. I believed his words, because I think for a man like Diddy, you have to remember about how he blackmailed people and he always kept videos of people. That means his biggest fear is humiliation. And this case over everything has been so humiliating to him. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve punishment, but I am saying I noticed that based on his words and the demeanor and all at court, that humiliation, and then and that humiliation extends to having to live in a prison with these commoners, with these peasants, all of that.
Let me go to the court of public opinion. You're a lawyer, so you're saying I deal in the court of law, and we know the court of public opinion is completely different than the court of law. You have a really cool, interesting perspective, because not only are you an attorney, but you're also a female. What is your opinion of the sentencing? Is it just, should the public be outraged? Domestic violence is disgusting. It's never good. This is beyond domestic violence, in my opinion. It's degrading. I almost want to use the word, which I can't for YouTube purposes, but it's just terrible. It's inhumane, in my opinion.
Inhumane.
Some of the details.
Surely.
I'll go with inhumane. What does Simone as the attorney think, but what does Simone as the woman think?
I think, so when you're Simone as the woman thinks, I think that this is a positive thing for domestic violence survivors, because the truth of the matter is this. The irony is this. He did the main thing that he did that got him into this is bribery, making that videotape of the beatdown go away. If he had not done that and just took his licks, whatever those might have been, losing some deals, this and that, I don't think he would have seen any jail time. I think he would have gotten some form of probation. It would have been a state offense. He's super duper rich. Yes, he would have lost some brand deals, but they would have come back over time. The ramification would have been a lot less. I think here, people forget that part of the real crime of what he did was he beat that girl, and then he stole the evidence and he made it go away past the statute of limitations. So there was never an opportunity for her to ever get justice or leave. And not only that, but what that does to a victim's mind, because it makes them say, every time I almost have an out, he takes my out away and I'm stuck with this fool. So what I think is powerful, the most powerful part, what I like about the sentence and how this was resolved, is that I hope that it makes someone, like I said, a victim out there, or even a daughter who's watching her mom go through it, say, you know what? There's strategies, there's ways to get up out this thing. And here it took the federal government, because the truth is the statute of limitations had expired for that. There was no way they could get him under state law. They had to concoct all of this other stuff. And some people do feel he was overcharged. I, though, feel that for this offense, the prostitution across state lines, that they hit it right, the nail on the head. Now, as a lawyer, I'm not allowed to consider, he can reduce for this, he can reduce for that. You can't look at that. If the man ends up having to serve it day for day, I think that 4 years is fair, because you have to consider he's not being sentenced just for domestic violence. He's being sentenced for the prostitution across state lines that had domestic violence interactions on some of those, on almost all of those interactions. So that's what is fair. Now, I'm not talking about domestic violence at the ice cream shop or at the restaurant on her birthday. No, but the ones that occurred during that interstate, I think that was fair. I think there's reasonable. And here's the thing. I actually think this has the potential to be the best thing to happen to Diddy in his life as a whole. Here's why. This man acknowledged that he said he has not been sober for the last 25 years. And I listened to every word of his children. His son, Justin, said respectfully with what needed to be said, and also even more in his words. If you listen to what wasn't said, he said, I believe this experience saved my father's life. He said, my father is now more calm, less aggressive, less angry. Because you have to remember, Justin is the son that was on scholarship at UCLA playing football when his daddy got mad at the coach and the amount of time allegedly that the coach was playing him or whatever, or how the coach talked to his son, whichever. And the daddy went in the weight room, took a weight, and hit the coach in the head with the weight. Thereafter, his son was no longer on the team. So when the son is saying, my father is more calm and I have this much better version of my father, Diddy was God prior to this. He wasn't changing nothing for nobody, not even his own children. Now he's got all the eyes of the world on him. And he's got, it's like 50-50. He's got half of this is a bunch of supporters, right? So they want to see him do good. And I told you, I believe humiliation is his biggest fear. So I do believe, and even if it's like a narcissist component in him, that's like, I don't want to let these people down when I get the hell out of here. Plus, by him receiving a sentence like 4 years, there's some group of people like myself who feels like that was a fair sentence. So when he comes out, those types of people are more likely to sit back, watch, and see, all right, let's give him another chance. Let's see if he's going to act like he got some goddamn sense when he walks into the free world, versus if he had walked out of there with time served, it would be some people marching in the streets, even though it wouldn't do no good, and other people who wouldn't even be open to allowing to see what redemption. So I think he will have opportunities to redeem himself, but he's going to have to be a real good person. That man can't get a traffic ticket, okay? He cannot raise his voice publicly. He is going to have to be an excellent human being. Y'all tell me in the comments below, what do y'all think? I think as a result, there's going to be a public eye on him like no other. And in turn, he is going to want to rise to the occasion, or at least has the opportunity. Now, what he did and how he behaves, I can't predict that. But I am saying, at least now, I do believe he has the opportunity to prove that he is no longer an asshole.
Where, now that the sentencing is done, I know there's been some, these attorneys have, put into the courts to go into a minimum security facility. Where does the conversation, how far does this take the conversation around domestic violence? I think I agree with you. I think there's a win there. I think you had somebody that had a lot of power that was 100% exposed, which sets a precedent, in my opinion, because, money, maybe. Where do we go now in this conversation? Where does this put our society, and where does this put the, I guess, court of public opinion at this point to kind of finalize it?
Regarding which aspect? Regarding
the aspect of just Diddy himself, getting sentenced. You said, hey, 4 years, I think that's fair. Even him becoming sober, just taking somebody who's in a very, very powerful spot and saying, no, what you're doing is wrong and you will be held accountable. In your opinion, does that move the conversation around domestic violence? Does it help that area a little bit?
I think it should. I think it absolutely should. And I think at the end of the day, I think what everyone's going to want to wait and see is, how does he behave when he comes out? Is he serious? Is he still going to be drinking? Is he still going to be doing drugs? Is he going to be the role model that his daughters deserve?
Simone Redwine from Mexico, gavel in hand. Thank you very much for this. You were incredible. I don't think there's any more for me to add. You have said it all. Please tell everybody where they can reach out to you and all things Simone.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you could see it, but my Instagram is attorney Simone Redwine. I spell Simone with a Y. And you can go, my YouTube channel is Girl, Is That Legal on YouTube.
Love this. I love this. Simone, thank you so much. And everybody listening to this, again, drop it in the comments, subscribe, leave all the reviews. And remember, curiosity should always be your mandate. But remember, you know what we do with the show. listen, walk in the shoes of yourself in life and not be your full self on purpose is a travesty. And remember, the quote we live by is, you're born an original, do not die a copy. Be good, be curious, and stay true. Much love, everybody.
We're so glad you enjoyed this episode of the Ryan Holtz Show Podcast. Please don't forget to smash that 5-star review, as Team Holtz will love you for it. Also, say hi to Ryan anywhere on social media using the handle @RyanHoltz1. That's RyanHoltz, the number 1. And if you or your business is looking to expand your brand, book a brand jam with Ryan using the link in the show notes.